Regret isn't about words, it's about loss. You could write the most perfectly crafted message, one that's poetic, raw, and packed with emotion, but if the person receiving it doesn't feel the absence of you in their life, it won't land the way you want it to. Regret isn't a reaction to what someone reads, it's a reaction to what they experience. That's the mistake most people make when they try to make someone regret hurting them. They think it's about saying the right thing, making some grand statement that will suddenly wake the other person up, make them see the error of their ways. But words are just words unless they're backed by something real. Regret happens when someone realizes that they've lost something valuable. It happens when they start to feel the void where you used to be, when they no longer have access to your energy, your kindness, your presence, when they realize that the version of you who adored them, who wanted them, who gave them warmth and attention is gone. That's what actually makes people second guess their choices. That's what triggers that deep gnawing feeling of I messed up. Think about the times in your life when you've felt real regret. Was it because of something someone said to you, or was it because of something you felt? A moment when you realized that something you had taken for granted was slipping through your fingers. Maybe it was a relationship where you thought you had more time, only to realize too late that the other person had moved on. Maybe it was a job opportunity you didn't appreciate until someone else took it. Maybe it was a friendship you neglected until you found yourself feeling lonely. Regret isn't intellectual, it's emotional, and it's triggered when a person starts to feel the consequences of their actions. That's why sending an emotionally charged message, one filled with pain or resentment, usually doesn't have the impact you hope it will. If anything, it does the opposite. When you pour out your feelings in a way that suggests you're still waiting for them, still hurt by them, still holding on to the past, you confirm to them that they haven't actually lost you because you're still engaging. You're still giving them access to your emotions. And if they know you're still emotionally invested, then they don't have to feel the full weight of losing you. They don't have to face the reality of what life without you actually looks like. But when you step back, when you go quiet, when you actually start to move forward in a way that's not about trying to get a reaction, but about genuinely reclaiming your energy, that's when regret starts to settle in. Not because you said the perfect thing, but because you stopped saying anything at all. Because suddenly there's a noticeable shift. They're no longer the center of your attention. Their actions no longer elicit a response from you. And that is when they start to wonder, wait, did I lose her? The irony is most people think that making someone regret hurting them requires action. They think they have to do something, say something, send something. But real regret isn't created through pursuit. It's created through absence. It's created when you become unavailable in a way that feels real and permanent. That's when the dynamic changes. That's when they stop seeing you as someone who's waiting for them and start seeing you as someone they can't reach anymore. And that's when the weight of their decisions actually starts to hit them. Now, this doesn't mean you have to go cold or play childish games. It doesn't mean you have to be bitter or pretend you don't care. It just means you have to let reality speak louder than any words ever could. You have to allow your absence to communicate what words never will. And this is where most people struggle, because stepping back means letting go of control. It means trusting that the right person will feel the impact of losing you without you having to make them feel it. And the truth is, not everyone will. Some people won't regret losing you, not because you weren't valuable, because they were never in the right place to appreciate you in the first place. And that's something you have to be okay with, because the ones who are capable of deep regret are also the ones who are capable of deep love. If someone doesn't miss you, if they don't feel your absence, if they don't experience that internal shift where they realize, oh no, I let something good slip away, then they were never going to give you what you deserved in the first place. So if you really want someone to regret hurting you, stop chasing that moment. Stop searching for the right words. Stop thinking that one text is going to flip a switch in their mind. Instead, focus on yourself, on your own energy, your own growth, your own happiness. Because the real power move isn't in making someone regret losing you. It's in becoming the version of yourself that never has to convince someone of your worth in the first place. And if they do regret losing you, if they do start to feel that absence, then let them sit with it. Let them feel the weight of their choices. Because if they truly value you, they'll do more than just regret it. They'll show up differently. They'll fight for you. And if they don't, then the only regret you should care about is the regret they'll feel when they realize far too late that you were never waiting for them to figure it out. If there's one thing people underestimate when they're hurt, it's the power of silence. When someone wrongs you, when they hurt you, betray your trust, or walk away like you were replaceable, your instinct is often to correct them, to make them see what they lost, to shake them into realizing that they made a mistake. And so, what do most people do? They send long texts. They try to appeal to logic. They list all the ways they were good to this person, hoping that the sheer weight of the truth will be enough to spark regret. But here's what you need to understand. Regret doesn't come from being told you made a mistake. It comes from feeling it. People don't regret losing someone because they read a message explaining why they should. They regret it when they start to feel the absence of that person in a way that disrupts their world. And nothing creates that feeling more powerfully than silence. When you choose silence instead of reaction, you shift the entire dynamic. You go from someone seeking validation to someone who is the validator. You signal without a single word that your value is not up for debate. And that's what gets under someone's skin. That's what makes them start to second guess themselves, because suddenly they're left alone with nothing but their own thoughts. And that's a far more powerful consequence than any emotional message you could ever send. Think about the times in your life when you've experienced real loss. It's not the moment someone tells you they're done that hurts the most. It's when you realize that their presence is truly gone. It's when you look around and see the empty space where they used to be. That's when regret sets in. That's when the mind starts racing with what if and did I mess up and can I fix this? But for someone to feel that, they have to be given the space to feel it. If you keep inserting yourself into their world, reminding them of your presence, even in a negative way, you protect them from that discomfort. You become a buffer between them and their own feelings. This is why silence is so effective. It forces the other person to face the consequences of their actions without you having to do anything. No explanations, no justifications, no attempts to convince them of what they lost. Just space. And space creates contrast. Contrast is everything in human psychology. People don't realize the value of something until it's no longer there to take for granted. We do this with relationships, with friendships, with careers, with everything in life. When something is constant, we get used to it. It becomes background noise. But when it disappears, when the rhythm of our life changes, that's when we wake up to what we had. This is exactly why chasing someone or continuously engaging with them after they've hurt you delays their ability to feel regret. Because if you're still there, arguing, explaining, waiting, they don't feel the contrast. They don't feel the shift. They don't feel your absence. And if they don't feel that loss, they don't get the chance to miss you. This doesn't mean you have to be cold or shut yourself off from emotions. It doesn't mean you have to pretend you don't care when you do, but it does mean that you have to resist the urge to seek closure in the form of reaction. Because true closure doesn't come from what they say in response to you. It comes from you deciding that you don't need their response at all. The person who hurt you is expecting something from you. Maybe they're expecting anger. Maybe they're expecting tears. Maybe they're expecting you to beg or try to make them see your worth. When you give them silence instead, you disrupt their expectations. You create a question mark in their mind. And people hate uncertainty. They hate not knowing how you feel, what you're thinking, what you're doing. That uncertainty becomes the breeding ground for doubt. And here's where the real shift happens. When you choose silence, you don't just make them question losing you, you make them question themselves. Because suddenly, they're no longer getting external validation from you. They no longer have proof that they had an effect on you, that they still hold power over you. And without that, they're left alone with a thought that becomes harder and harder to ignore. Did I make a mistake? That's when regret takes root. That's when they start to feel the emotional consequences of their choices. And if they do realize they messed up, if they do come back, it won't be because you convinced them to. It will be because they felt it. And that's the only kind of regret that actually changes behavior. But here's the truth. Sometimes they won't come back. Sometimes silence will reveal that they were never capable of valuing you in the first place. And that's a painful reality to accept. But it's also a gift. because it frees you from wasting more time on someone who was never meant to hold a place in your future. So if you truly want someone to regret hurting you, resist the urge to hand them that realization on a silver platter. Let them sit with their own choices. Let them feel the weight of your absence. And most importantly, let yourself move forward with the kind of grace and self-respect that makes it clear you were never waiting for them to realize your worth. They were simply too blind to see it. If you really want someone to regret hurting you, you have to understand a fundamental truth about human nature. People don't value what they don't have to work for. When you keep chasing after someone who hurt you, when you keep explaining why they were wrong or trying to get them to see your worth, you're actually doing the opposite of what you think. You're making it easier for them to move on, because every time you reach out, you're reinforcing the idea that they can have access to you no matter how they treated you. And if they know they can still reach you, if they know they haven't really lost you, then they never get to experience the full weight of that loss. Regret is not born from words. It's born from realization. And realization only happens when someone is forced to feel the consequences of their actions. If they don't feel that loss, if they don't feel your absence as something real and irreversible, then they don't have a reason to question their choices. Think about it this way. When you're used to having something readily available, whether it's a person, a privilege, or even a habit, you don't think much about it. It becomes part of the background, something you assume will always be there. It's only when it's gone, when you suddenly have to go without it, that you start to really appreciate its value. This is why people take things for granted until they lose them. And this is why you cannot make someone regret hurting you by continuing to offer them your attention, your energy, or your emotions on demand. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they've been hurt is feeling like they need closure from the person who hurt them. They think, if I could just get him to see what he did, if I could just make him understand, then I could move on. But here's what you need to realize. Closure is not something you get from someone else. It's something you give yourself. Waiting for someone to acknowledge their mistake is just another way of giving away your power. It keeps you in a cycle of hoping for something that may never come. And in the meantime, it prevents them from truly feeling what it means to lose you. Because as long as you're waiting for their response, as long as you're seeking their validation, they still hold a piece of your emotional energy. And they can feel that. They can feel that you're still there, still affected, still waiting. And that knowledge removes their need to reflect on their own behavior. Because why would they need to reflect when they know they still have an emotional hold on you? But when you shift your focus from waiting for their regret to reclaiming your power, the entire dynamic changes. When you stop looking for their reaction and start focusing on your own growth, you send a message without saying a single word. I am no longer available to be taken for granted. And that's when people start to feel the shift. That's when they start to wonder, because people don't start missing you when you're still showing up. They start missing you when they realize they no longer have access to you, when they go to check if you're still there and suddenly you're not, when they expect a response and it never comes, when they assume you're still affected and instead they see you thriving without them. This is where self-respect becomes the most powerful tool in your arsenal, not just as a way to make someone regret hurting you, but as a way to make sure that you never have to rely on someone else's regret for your healing. Because here's the truth, someone else's regret is not what will heal you. Even if they do come back, even if they do apologize, it will never undo the fact that they hurt you in the first place. It will never erase the time you spent questioning your worth, waiting for them to realize it. That's why the goal should never be to make someone regret hurting you. The goal should be to become so solid in your own value that their regret, when it inevitably comes, is irrelevant to your happiness. That's the real win. Not getting an apology, not hearing them say they made a mistake, but reaching a place where their mistake no longer defines your self-worth, where their absence is not something you grieve, but something you grow from. And paradoxically, that's what will make them regret losing you the most. Because nothing is more haunting than realizing you let go of someone who became even better without you. If you want someone to regret hurting you, you have to understand one thing. People don't feel regret when they see you suffering. They feel regret when they see you thriving without them. A lot of people think that showing their pain will make the person who hurt them feel guilty. They believe that if they express enough sadness, enough anger, enough disappointment, it will force the other person to realize what they've done. But that's not how human psychology works. Regret isn't born from seeing someone broken. It's born from realizing what you've lost. When someone walks away from you, when they hurt you or take you for granted, they are operating under an assumption you will always be there. They assume that no matter what, they still have some level of access to you. Maybe not in the same way as before, but in some way. They assume they still occupy space in your mind, that they still have emotional weight in your life. And as long as they believe that, they don't feel a true sense of loss. But the moment that assumption is broken, the moment they look at your life and see that they are no longer a part of it in any meaningful way, that's when regret starts to creep in. It's not just about moving on, it's about moving up. It's about evolving into the kind of person who doesn't just survive without them, but becomes better in their absence. Because when someone sees you not just existing, but flourishing without them, that's when they have to sit with the realization that they misjudged you, that they underestimated your strength, that they walked away from something rare. This is why self-growth is the most powerful response to heartbreak. Not for them, not as some strategy to get them back, but because it shifts the entire dynamic in your own mind. When you're focused on growth, on becoming more confident, more fulfilled, more engaged in your own life, you stop seeing their absence as a loss and start seeing it as an opportunity. And when you start seeing it that way, something interesting happens. You stop wanting their regret, because you realize that their regret is no longer relevant to your happiness. There's a saying, success is the best revenge. But I would go even further than that. Success is not just revenge, it's clarity. It's the proof that you never needed their validation to be worthy. It's the proof that their choice to walk away was not a reflection of your value, but of their inability to see it. And the irony is, that's when people start to regret their decisions the most, because suddenly they don't just see the person they walked away from, they see the person they missed out on. Imagine this, someone hurts you, and instead of crumbling, instead of begging for closure, instead of proving your pain, you shift your energy, you invest in yourself, you become more confident, more exciting, more radiant, you start doing things that bring you joy, you start surrounding yourself with people who see your worth effortlessly. You start living in a way that makes it clear that you were never dependent on them for happiness in the first place. And then one day they see you, maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe just by watching your energy shift in real life. And suddenly it hits them. They are no longer a part of this version of you. And that's when regret turns into something deeper, because regret is one thing, but realizing that you can never go back, that's a whole different kind of pain. The biggest mistake people make when they want someone to regret hurting them is keeping a door open. They leave subtle signs that they're still available. They post cryptic messages hoping the other person will notice. They linger in conversations that should have ended. They keep responding, keep engaging, keep making sure that the person knows they're still emotionally invested. And all that does is soften the loss. It tells the other person, you may have walked away, but I'm still here. And as long as they believe that, they never have to fully confront what it means to lose you. So the most powerful thing you can do, disappear from their world in every way that matters, not in a petty way, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that makes it clear that your life is moving forward, whether they're in it or not. And when they finally realize what they lost, it won't be because you tried to make them see it. It will be because they saw it on their own, and by then it will be too late. One of the most powerful things you can do after someone hurts you is to show them, not through words, not through confrontation, but through your actions, that they miscalculated, that they expected one outcome, but reality gave them something entirely different. Because here's the truth. When people hurt you, they are making a bet, a subconscious one, but a bet nonetheless. They are betting that their actions won't come with real consequences, that even if you're upset, even if you react, even if you express your disappointment, they won't truly lose you. That over time, things will smooth over and they'll still hold some level of significance in your world. And most of the time, that bet pays off. Because when someone hurts us, our first instinct is often to prove our pain, to show them how much they affected us, to demand accountability, to seek an explanation. And ironically, that reaction actually gives them what they want, relevance. Because as long as someone knows they still have an emotional grip on you, they don't fully feel the weight of their actions. But what happens when the outcome they expected never arrives? What happens when they look up and realize that instead of being consumed by them, you have outgrown them? That the version of you they hurt is not the version of you that exists today? That's when regret starts to settle in, not as a fleeting thought, but as a deep, gnawing realization. Because what people truly fear is not your anger, it's your indifference. Anger still implies emotional investment. It means they still hold space in your mind. But indifference? That's terrifying because it means you have placed them in a category that no one ever wants to be in, irrelevant to your happiness. And the only way to reach that level of indifference is to make a fundamental shift, one that most people never do. Instead of trying to make them see what they lost, focus entirely on what you are gaining without them. Because the moment you shift your focus from them to you, everything changes. Your energy changes, your confidence changes, your standards change. You stop operating from a place of trying to elicit a reaction, and instead you start living in a way that makes it clear you were never the one who lost in this situation. And here's where it gets interesting. When someone hurts you and expects you to react in a certain way, whether it's by chasing them, seeking closure, or proving your worth, and instead they see you thriving in a way they never anticipated, they start to experience something powerful. Discomfort, not just regret, but discomfort with the way they handled things. Because now they're forced to sit with a reality that their actions did not just hurt you, but cost them something valuable. And that's when the weight of their choices starts to sink in. But none of this happens if you're still emotionally entertaining their presence. If you're still subtly trying to get their attention, still reacting to their breadcrumbs, still making sure they notice you in some way. You have to disappear in a way that matters. Not necessarily in the literal sense, not by blocking them out of spite or cutting them off in a way that feels performative, but by making a fundamental decision they are no longer relevant to your personal growth story. Because here's what will happen. At first, they may not notice. They may think they're just upset. They're just playing hard to get. That eventually you'll soften, you'll engage, you'll come back in some way. But then time passes and they realize that you're not coming back. And then they start looking at your life, what you're doing, how you're evolving, and they see something unexpected. You're not just fine without them. You're better without them. And that is what shifts everything, because now they don't just regret hurting you. They regret underestimating you. They regret assuming that they could walk away and still hold the same significance in your life. They regret not seeing in the moment what you were truly worth. But by the time they fully grasp this, it's too late, because you have moved forward in a way that makes it clear your life was never dependent on their presence. And that's when they realize the truth. You were never the one who lost them. They were the ones who lost you. There's a moment, a very specific moment, when someone realizes they've made a mistake. It doesn't happen when you first walk away. It doesn't happen when you tell them how much they've hurt you. It doesn't even happen when they see you trying to move on. It happens later, when enough time has passed that they assume they should be over it, yet for some reason they aren't. See, when someone hurts you, they usually expect to move on without consequence. They assume that even if there's some temporary guilt, it will eventually fade, that life will continue, and that their decision, whatever it was the right one. But what they don't account for is time. Time has a funny way of revealing things people don't see in the moment. At first, they might feel relief. They may feel a sense of control, a sense of validation. But then, gradually, something starts to shift. Because here's the truth. Time doesn't just make people forget. It also makes them realize. And what they begin to realize is you are not where they left you. The version of you they knew, the one they took for granted, the one they expected to always be there, doesn't exist anymore. You have evolved, and they have stayed the same. And that is what starts to eat at them. Not just the idea that they hurt you, Not just the thought that they made a mistake, but the realization that they no longer have access to you in the way they once did. Because if there's one thing people underestimate, it's the power of absence. Most people think attraction is built through presence, through being around, through engaging, through staying on someone's radar. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remove yourself completely, because when you disappear, something happens in their mind that they don't expect. They start filling in the blanks. They start wondering what you're doing, how you're feeling, whether you're thinking about them at all. And as that curiosity grows, it turns into something else. Regret. Because now they're not just missing you, they're realizing that you no longer need them in the way they once needed you to. And that's terrifying, because when someone assumes they can hurt you and still maintain a sense of importance in your life, they feel powerful. But when they realize that their absence hasn't left you broken, it's left you better. They feel something they never expected. Powerless. Powerless over the outcome. Powerless over your emotions, powerless over the narrative they thought they controlled. And it's in that moment that they start to panic. That's when they start looking for ways back in. They might test the waters with a casual message, something seemingly harmless, just to gauge your reaction. Or they might reach out with nostalgia, bringing up an old memory, reminding you of the good times, hoping it will trigger an emotional response. Or, if they're truly desperate, they might try to evoke jealousy, posting things designed to make you react, subtly trying to pull you back into their world. But here's the key. None of that matters, because by the time they realize what they've lost, you have already won. You have already done the one thing they never expected you to do. You have moved on without them, not just externally, but internally. And that's the part they weren't prepared for, because deep down, they assumed they would always have a place in your heart, that no matter what happened, there would always be a part of you that longed for them, that waited for them, that hoped for their return. But instead, what they find is a version of you who is stronger, happier, and completely indifferent to whether they come back or not. And that is what breaks them. Not your anger, not your sadness, not even your silence, but the fact that their presence no longer affects you in the way they thought it would, that they are now just a chapter you have already finished reading. And that's when they truly start to feel the weight of their choices. Because while they were busy assuming they could replace you, they didn't realize that you were becoming irreplaceable. And by the time they understand that, it's too late. Because you're not just someone they miss, you're someone they will never have the same way again. And that is the kind of loss that time doesn't heal.